Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to share today's journey with you. We are going to unpack a genuinely fascinating narrative, treating it as a grim, dark fable that brilliantly brings to life the dense, Fichtean dialectic of the self and the void. If you're a philosophy student, or honestly just someone who's ever wondered how abstract concepts about reality, willpower, and nothingness can be translated into a vivid mythological landscape, well, you are in for an absolute treat today. Let's just jump right in. Okay, let's dive into this idea right from the start. The Dark Elf tells us, I am the rigid, calcified barrier that gives your chaotic will its shape. I am the friction that allows your internal fire to ignite. This immediately sets the atmospheric tone for our entire exploration. It introduces us to this overarching concept of the absolute not I. It's telling us that external resistance isn't just some minor annoyance or a temporary obstacle. No, it is the essential enemy. It is literally the friction required to spark your own self-awareness. So here is our roadmap through this dialectical descent today. 1, we'll look at the absolute not I. 2, the 6 parables of negation. 3, the Crimson Mask's origin. 4, catalysts and architects. And finally, 5, the transformation from grave to throne. Starting off with Section 1, the absolute not I, and why it acts as the ultimate canvas of resistance. The fundamental truth of this dark fable is that every sovereign will absolutely needs a world to push against in order to exist at all. To really grasp this, we need to break down 2 crucial Fichtean concepts. First up is the absolute not I. You can think of it as the ultimate canvas of resistance. It's the rigid, calcified barrier of external reality, moral codes, and the laws of the kingdom. Second, we have the Anstoß. This is the philosophical collision. It's that jagged, subterranean crash where your sense of self violently hits its absolute limit. And why does this matter? Well, because without this collision, without the Anstoß, you would remain nothing more than a formless scream in a vacuum. You would never realize your own capacity for power or self-awareness. This perfectly illustrates the central tension of our fable. On one side, we have the Dark Elf, who actually values this rigid barrier. He recognizes that a person of power needs a surface against which to strike. The resistance literally justifies your existence. But in stark contrast, the Crimson Jester, or the Crimson Omen, doesn't want to just strike the barrier. He brings this jagged laughter and seeks its terrifying destruction. He wants to violently pierce the wall of law just to reveal the staggering empty nothingness that lies beneath all of our human constructs. Moving on to Section 2, the parables of negation and the nature of the collision. To truly understand this collision between the self and the void, especially as a student of philosophy, we can look at these 6 parables. They act as literal encounters in our dark fable, but they ground the abstract philosophy into vivid metaphors for the human condition. Let's walk through them. First, the Weaver of Masks. This represents the illusion of reason. It's that comforting, painted mask placed right over the terrifying emptiness of reality just so the herd feels safe. Next, the Anchor of Gravity represents societal expectations. It's a heavy, suffocating fog tying the soul to a treadmill of passive despair. Then we have the Sawdust Altar. This shows us exactly what happens when a sovereign will actually strikes the wall of law. The monolithic rules dissolve into mere sawdust, proving there is only the nothing behind the mask. We also have the Mirrorless Sentinel, which represents the agonizing psychological death of shedding your artificial ego simply because the glass reflects no face. Then, the Thorns of Reason are the literalization of slave morality, acting as a snare designed to trap the weak in dead metaphors. And finally, the Infinite Maw. This is the ultimate realization, a monstrous synthesis where the individual realizes they are the void staring back at itself, mastering their own internal chaos. Which brings us to Section 3. The Crimson Mask's origin, the moment of peak resistance. So, what actually happens when those illusions finally break? Let's look at the mask's origin. It's forged within the absolute, purifying abyss, crafted by the Weaver of Masks. This veil of Maya is essentially a shimmering fabric of Apollonian illusions, perfectly crafted to hide the staggering, empty nothingness sitting at the heart of all human constructs. It creates this profound narrative tension, showing us exactly how the herd desperately clings to these beautiful cages, entirely mistaking the Weaver's veil for the sacred architecture of a moral universe. Section 4. Catalysts and Architects, and what it means to strike the wall of law. Now that the abyss is exposed, we have to ask who is actually equipped to navigate it.
We can contrast two vital archetypes here. First up is the Crimson Jester. The Jester acts as the catalyst. Through his jagged laughter, he performs a complete ontological deconstruction. He is the one who violently pierces the wall of law with his blade, exposing the void for what it is. On the other side, we have the Sovereign Architect, or the Proto-Ubermensch. This is the figure who survives that agonizing psychological death of the mirrorless corridor. They completely shed their artificial self in order to self-determine and command their own reality.
And finally, Section 5, From Grave to Throne, the Sovereign Dawn. Let's trace how this all builds chronologically through our dark fable. It starts with the Weaver of Masks crafting that Apollonian illusion to hide the void. Then, the Anstoss occurs. The Crimson Jester violently breaches the wall of law, dissolving it into sawdust. This critical collision exposes the infinite maw of Knoll's space. And finally, the Sovereign Architect steps up to claim the throne, mastering the monstrous synthesis of wearing the cracked vessel of the ego, all while harboring the wild, creative fire of the abyss inside. In this newly disenchanted wasteland, we enter the uncanny forest. Here, the ancient, predatory roots are the literalization of slave morality, turning reason itself into a tangle of thorns designed specifically to snare the weak. The sovereign individual, however, steps right past these dead metaphors. Meaning is no longer bound by these thorns. Instead, the only law remaining is your capacity to endure the terrifying silence of the abyss and fully command your own internal chaos. So the crucial point here is this contrast. For the weak, who are governed by the heavy expectations of the spirit of gravity and its anchor, the void is a grave. It's a suffocating prison of passive despair and a never-ending treadmill of hollow suffering. But for the sovereign individual, the void transforms into a throne. Through this active collision, the void becomes the ultimate open canvas. It's a space of active nihilism, an opportunity to master the monstrous synthesis of the self, realizing that they are simply the void staring right back at itself. When all the beautiful cages have burned away, we arrive at the ultimate takeaway of our dialectical descent. Sovereignty is no longer handed down from above by some divine decree. No, it is the gift of the blade. It is an authority that you claim, that you fight for, and that you self-author in a universe that has finally, mercifully, fallen completely silent. I want to leave you with this thought, to reflect on your own philosophical collision, your very own Anstoss. When your will inevitably strikes the rigid, calcified barrier of reality, what will you do? Will you succumb to the heavy, stagnant weight of the spirit of gravity? Or will you synthesize your internal chaos, integrate the abyss, and claim your throne in the void? Thank you so much for exploring this phenomenal dark fable with me today. Keep questioning the canvas.